before ending up with me. I turned it between my fingers. Listen to the faint click of metal on a nail. Such a small sound, but clear. Stood at the bus stop, even after my bus left. Watched it pull away without regret. I hadn't missed it, I just hadn't taken it. The air felt colder without the engine nearby. Quieter. I remember when every missed opportunity felt personal, like I'd failed to keep up with something. Now I see it differently. Not everything you don't take is a loss. Some things simply aren't yours anymore. I stay there for a moment longer. Hands in my pockets, listening to the faint hum of the city. No frustration, no urgency, just space. Eventually, I started walking, not toward another stop. faint smell of coffee still in the air. I rested my elbows on the surface, looked at nothing in particular. There was a time I couldn't sit like this. My mind would search for something, a reason to stand, a reason to leave. Now there was no pressure, nothing pulling me away. I noticed how steady my hands felt. How come my breathing was not forced, not practiced, just natural. I stayed there without checking the time, without wondering what came next. There was no gap that needed filling, just a quiet continuation of being exactly where I was. I stepped outside without my phone. Didn't realize it until I was already halfway down the street. For a second, I thought about going back. That old reflex, that quiet panic. But it faded, nothing urgent was waiting for me there. Nothing needed my attention that badly. The air felt different without that invisible tether, like I was moving without being reachable. I listened to my footsteps, the uneven rhythm against the pavement, something I hadn't noticed in a long time. There was a freedom in being unavailable and not expecting interruption. I didn't walk faster, I didn't walk slower, didn't look for familiar faces. I just stayed where I was, not waiting, not remembering, just living inside a moment that belonged only to me. Just living inside a moment that belonged only to me. I was tying my shoelace when it slipped loose again. The knot didn't hold the first time or the second. I paused, fingers resting on it, not frustrated, just patient. There was a time small things like this annoyed me, felt like interruptions, like delays. Now it just felt human. I tied it again, slower, making sure it stayed. Not forcing it, just giving it attention. It held. I stood up and took a few steps, not thinking about it anymore. Some things don't need strength, they just need care. And once they're steady, you forget they were ever fragile. I didn't need to interact, I didn't need to respond. I just stayed there. And for once, nothing was asking me to be anywhere else. Because the fabric felt familiar in my hands. I remember wearing on a night that mattered, not because of what happened, but because of how I felt. Present, open, unprotected. I didn't think about the outcome, I didn't think about how it would end. I just lived inside it. Holding it now, it didn't carry the same weight. It was just close, just something that stayed. I finished folding it carefully, placed it with the others, not separating it, not elevating it, just letting it belong to the present. I remember the morning I stopped setting an alarm, not because I had nowhere to go, but because for the first time I trusted myself to wake up. The room was pale blue with early light, dust moving slowly in the air, like it had nowhere else it needed to be. A car passed outside, tires against wet asphalt, that soft rolling sound, the kind that disappears before you can follow it. I stayed still for a while, listening to my own breathing, not trying to change it, not trying to become anything else. There was a time I would have filled that silence immediately, reached for my phone, checked if someone remembered me. But that morning, I didn't need to be seen, I was already there. Later, I made coffee, Watched the steam rise and fade. It didn't ask permission, it didn't hesitate. I realized then, nothing in nature forces itself to become. It just moves when it's ready. A version of me that needed constant noise, constant proof, constant reassurance. He wasn't gone, he was just sitting somewhere behind me now, quiet, no longer driving. I opened the window, cold air answered without apology, and I let it stay. I remember the morning. I remember the morning I stopped setting an alarm. I remember the morning. I remember the morning. I remember the morning I stopped setting an alarm. Sitting on the dashboard like it belonged there. My hand stayed on the steering, not gripping, just resting. I remembered how there used to be this constant urgency, like every moment had to lead somewhere, like standing still now, falling behind. But nothing was chasing me now. Not who I was, not who I thought I'd become, just who was here, breathing, waiting, not needing to move yet. Eventually I opened the door, but not because I had to, just because. This afternoon, the sun reached the kitchen floor slowly, like it wasn't sure it was allowed to enter. I noticed it all standing at the sink, hands still wet, water running longer than necessary. Soft, steady stream disappearing into the drain. There was a time when my mind never stayed in one place, always ahead of me, pulling me somewhere else. But today, it stayed. Today I stood there longer than I needed to, watching the light shift a few inches across the floor. No announcement, no signal, just movement. I used to think change would feel like arrival, like stepping into a different life all at once. But it feels more like this, small adjustments, quiet realignment.
I woke up before the sky had decided what color it wanted to be. That in-between hour when everything feels temporarily unclaimed. The air in the room was cooler than usual. My blanket had slipped halfway to the floor sometime during the night. I didn't remember moving.
For a moment I stayed there, eyes open, listening to nothing in particular, not waiting for anything, just aware that I was here.
A faint hum from somewhere in the building, pipes or electricity, something working quietly behind the walls. I used to feel mornings immediately.
Music, noise, distraction, anything to avoid that empty space at the start.
But now I let it exist.
My feet touch the floor, cold, solid, certain.
I walked to the window, saw one light on in the building across the street. Someone else awake, someone else inside their own life. No connection, just coexistence. I realized how many moments like this I had missed before, always rushing toward the next version of myself as if the present was just a hallway.
But this wasn't a hallway,
This was a room, and I was already inside it.
I didn't need to become anyone else this morning.
I just needed to stand there,
Breathing
while the sky slowly made up its mind. Most of it happened when no one could see.
In the way certain memories stop hurting, in the way silence stop feeling like rejection. I stood up eventually, walked to the mirror, not to check anything, not to fix anything, just to see the same face, but less resistance behind it. I turned away without judgment. Some things don't need confirmation, they're already shown. They're already true. I was halfway through tying my shoes when I stopped. Not because I forgot how, but because I realized I wasn't in a hurry. The lace hung loose in my hand, one end brushing the floor. I could hear someone upstairs walking slowly, each step deliberate. The room smelled faintly of last night's air, cool and unmoving, like it had been waiting for me to notice it again. I finished tying the knot, not tight, just enough. There was a time I did everything fast, as if slowing down and losing momentum, as if stillness could erase me. But nothing disappears just because you pause. I stood up and looked around, nothing had changed position. The chair was still where I left it, the glass on the table still half full, proof that the world didn't demand constant adjustment. I walked to the door, hand resting on the handle, felt the temperature of the metal in my palm. sat down slowly, not thinking about yesterday, not thinking about tomorrow. Just this moment, just this breath. There's a kind of freedom in not needing anything else, in realizing nothing is missing, because nothing was ever wrong. I lean back, close my eyes, not escaping, not remembering, just resting. I went back to the kitchen and leaned against the counter. The clock above the stove kept moving, unaware of anything I was feeling, unaware of anything at all. There was comfort in that, in knowing the world doesn't stop just because something inside you does. I remember nights when time felt heavier, when every minute carried weight, when I didn't know how to exist without holding on to something. Tonight it felt different. Time wasn't against me, it wasn't ahead of me. Ooh, it was just there. Ooh, I ran my hand across the surface of the table, feeling the texture, feeling something real. remember the morning I stopped setting an alarm, not because I had nowhere to go, but because for the first time I trusted myself to wake up. The room was pale blue with early light, dust moving slowly in the air like it had nowhere else it needed to be. A car passed outside, tires against wet asphalt, that soft rolling sound, the kind that disappears before you can follow it. I stayed still for a while, listening to my own breathing, not trying to change it, not trying to become anything else. There was a time I would have filled that silence immediately, reached for my phone, checked if someone remembered me. But that morning I didn't need to be seen, I was already there. Later I made coffee, watched the steam rise and fade. It didn't ask permission, it didn't hesitate. I realized then, nothing in nature forces itself to be calm, it just moves when it's ready. The version of me that needed constant noise, constant proof, constant reassurance. He wasn't gone, he was just sitting somewhere behind me now, quiet, no longer driving. I opened the window, cold air entered without apology, and I let it stay. I remember the morning. I remember the morning. I remember the morning I stopped setting an alarm. Are no longer driving. heart setting and alone. I remember the morning